This video is 11.2 homework number 1, and in this video we're going to be looking at multiplying rational expressions. So before we start with that, let's just do a review of multiplying numerical fractions. When we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerators and we multiply the denominators. So here we're going to multiply 3 times 1, and in the denominator we're multiplying 4 times 5. Okay, now if the numerator of one fraction and the denominator of another fraction, or both numerator and the denominator can reduce, we're going to reduce. Now, we call this simplifying, or you've also heard it called cross-reducing. So we're going to simplify or cross-reduce first. So 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 10 5 times, and then the 3 and the 6 will both divide by 3. So now that we've simplified or cross-reduced, now we can multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. So that's just a little review of multiplying numerical fractions. Now let's look at multiplying rational expressions. So first I want to see, can I cross-reduce? Well, in this particular problem, I cannot cross-reduce. The 4 and the 3 in the numerators do not reduce by the 5t and the t to the 7th in the denominators. So I'm just going to multiply the numerators, 4 times 3, multiply the denominators, 5t times t to the 7th. Now remember, this is 5t to the first. So when we multiply, we add the exponents for the t. So 1 plus 7 is 8. So this answer is 12 over 5t to the 8th. Now, notice this time they do not ask you to state any excluded values, so you don't have to worry about that on this particular problem. All right, number 2, I've already done it for you, as you can tell. 3 times 6 is 18. Again, we're adding the exponents for the for the t's. Sorry, not the 7s. Okay. All right, now, number 3, this one says to multiply and to state any excluded values. So notice that nothing, it's just like whenever we are simplifying rational expressions. If the numerator of one fraction will not be reduced or canceled by the denominator of another fraction, then you can't reduce, you can't cancel. So we're just going to show that we're multiplying. So you do not have to actually do the distributive property. In fact, I advise against it. So that's how I got that answer. But this particular problem, they do want you to state any excluded values. It's actually the only problem, or one like it, that asks you to state any excluded values. So going back to the previous notes from 11.1, look at the denominators. The denominator. And we're looking at the factors, and we're taking each factor equal to 0 and solving for x. So this answer is -8 and +4 for the excluded values. Okay, all right, so now we're going to look at factoring. So the first 3 problems that I showed you, there wasn't any factoring involved. Everything was already factored for you. There wasn't anything to cancel or reduce. So in this particular problem, we're going to do both. We're going to factor first. Now notice that t squared minus t minus 30 is not a fraction. So I wrote it over 1 to make it look like a fraction, because when we're multiplying fractions, we want both of them to look like fractions. So anytime you have just a polynomial that doesn't look like a fraction, put it over 1. All right, so now we're going to factor. I'm going to start by factoring the first numerator, and the greatest common factor is 3. Now the denominator does not factor. That's just going to say t minus 6 times. Now t squared minus t minus 30, that will factor to t minus 6 and t plus 5. Now I can, what we do, called cross-reduce, or just simplifying. T minus 6's cancel out the t minus 6. Now this t minus 6 in the denominator is a 1 from the first denominator. This t minus 6 in that numerator is a 1. So remember, when it cancels, it becomes a 1. So when I multiply 3 times t plus 1 times 1 times t plus 5, I get 3t plus 1 times t plus 5 over 1, which is just going to look like 3 parentheses t plus 1 t parentheses t plus 5. Okay, don't put it over 1. Because remember it says they want you to simplify your answer. All right, we don't have to state any excluded values on that one. Number 5. All right, let's look at, we got a bunch of factoring here. We're going to start with factoring this numerator. And that will be x plus 6, x plus 3. And the denominator, that first fraction, doesn't factor anymore. The numerator of the second fraction factors to x minus 8, x plus 7. And the denominator of the second fraction factors to x plus 7, x plus 3. Now, I can cross reduce and I can also simplify in one fraction. So I'm just simplifying. Let's see, x minus 8 cancels out this x minus 8. X plus 3 cancels out this x plus 3. And this x plus 7 cancels out this x plus 7. So we can cancel and reduce in the same fraction, or we can cancel and reduce in different fractions. So everything cancels. Remember, when it cancels, it becomes ones. So in the numerator, I have x plus 6 times 1 times 1 times 1, which is x plus 6. In the denominator, I have 1 times 1 times 1, which is just 1. So that simplifies to x plus 6. All right. All right, the last one is another volume. We've done a lot with volume this year. So remember, the volume formula is length times width times height. Now this time you don't have to solve for length or width or height because we're trying to find volume. So these over here are the length, the width, and the height. Oops. Okay, so we're going to multiply length times width times height. Now I kind of put these in a different order than length, width, and height, but it doesn't really matter as long as you have each of those fractions written down. I actually have the length and then the height and then the width written down. All right, so what we're looking at is factoring. So we're going to start with factoring the numerator of the first fraction. M minus 4, M plus 3. And then factor the denominator of the first fraction. M minus 6, M plus 3. Now the numerator of the next fraction. We can factor out a 2. And then the denominator of the second fraction doesn't factor anymore. The third fraction, the m to the third, doesn't factor anymore. And the denominator of the last fraction will factor to m plus 5, m minus 4. So once we get everything factored, then we want to look for ways we can cancel. Now I see that I have 2 m plus 3's in the numerators, but I only have 1 m plus 3 in the denominator. So I can only cancel out one of the m plus 3's in the numerator with the m plus 3 in the denominator. I also have an m minus 4 that will cancel out. That's m minus 4 on the end. I also have these monomials, m and m to the third. So I'm going to cancel out the m, the one that has the smallest exponent, and take the large exponent and subtract that small exponent that I just canceled out. So this is now going to be m squared. All right, so in the numerator, remember these are all ones when I canceled out. All right, so multiplying in the numerators, I have 1 times 1 times 2m plus 3 times m squared. So we write the monomials first, 2m squared, and then the m plus 3 in parentheses. In the denominator, I have m minus 6 times 1 times 1 times m plus 5 times 1. So that's m minus 6 times m plus 5. And that is the volume of that rectangular prism. All right, so that's multiplying rational expressions. You're now ready to do the homework problems for this